Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you here. Are you enjoying the conference? This has been a very upbeat conference. First of all, I want you to put your hands together and I want you to applaud everybody that was out carousing at 2 o'clock in the morning last night and then was in line at Starbucks at 7 o'clock this morning. Put your hands together for them. Give them a big round of applause. Yeah, there was literally nobody at Starbucks at 7 o'clock this morning. All right, so there's been a lot of talk about AI in the marketplace today. There's a lot of doomsday predictions about what it's going to mean for humans, that we're going to displace entire workforces and maybe entire populations. I'm going to talk about some of that today, but this presentation is really more. It's really about the role of humans in the entire IT ecosystem moving forward. And we're going to talk about industries and how we see a shift to human-based industries, massive shifts in industry today, and really what that's going to mean for productivity on an economic basis, and then what the resulting explosion is going to be in innovation and the role that technology is going to play there, particularly as computing itself becomes human, infused with AI capabilities such as machine learning and deep learning, and how that's going to play out in the market that you serve today. So let's get started with industry. I want to show you some really interesting data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is GDP in the US going back to 1947 through to today. And what you can see is that there's been a massive shift to services-based industries over the time period. In fact, 86% of all GDP today is from services-based industries. And of course, just over 10% of all industries are now manufacturing and agriculture. And what's really interesting about services-based industries is that they rely very, very heavily on a human workforce. In fact, 90% of all employees in the US today work in a services-based industry. And this isn't just a US phenomenon. This is a worldwide phenomenon. 65% of all worldwide GDP comes from services-based industries. So you're probably looking at this saying, okay, so what? Looks like this has been happening for a long time. Well, let me show you what the impact is on the employee base. So let's go back to 1990, and what you're looking at here is the industries with the highest employment by state. And what you see in the blue is manufacturing, what's in red is retail, and then I want you to keep your eye on orange. So let's move forward. Orange is healthcare, red is retail, orange is healthcare. So over this period, healthcare has become the largest employer in almost every state in the United States today. So there's been a massive shift in the way we think about the employee base for the United States. And so this has very, very real implications for industry. And what we've seen over the time period is how productivity in the US economy has changed over the time period. And what you can see is that there were massive efficiencies in agriculture and in manufacturing in the mid-90s. And a lot of that was driven by new technology. In fact, what used to take 10 people back in 1947, right around the end of World War II, now takes one person today. And in manufacturing, what used to take 7 people now takes 1 person. But take a look at what's happened in productivity around services-based industries. We've barely eked out a doubling in efficiency and productivity of the workforce over this 70-year time period. And what that means is that there was less than 1% growth in productivity over the last 70 years every year. And at this rate, if we continue at this rate, it's going to be another 50 years before we achieve a 3 times productivity gain in services-based industries. Now, historically, gains in productivity are actually really good. They're good for wages. They, of course, impact profits, corporate profits. It typically leads to higher economic growth, and it also typically leads to lower unemployment. And so this is really where we look at the market and we say, oh, my goodness, how are we going to drive efficiency in these services-based organizations? Because it's typically very, very difficult to drive automation into services industries because the jobs are typically human and they don't necessarily replicate very well. And so this is really where the promise of AI lives, with these new introductions, again, of machine learning and deep learning capabilities. This is how we start to think as analysts about how do we get a 4 times or a 5 times or even a 6 times uplift in services-based industries over the coming period. And so this has very, very real implications for how we all work as industry and how we work in our economy. And let me tell you something else. What we tend to see at the end of highly automated environments is a lot of innovation. And a really good proxy for innovation right now is the number of patents and trademarks that we see filed on a worldwide basis. And what you're looking at here is actually patents. Patents are at an all-time high. 3 million new patents were filed in 2016. 43% of them came from China. And then the same for trademarks. 7 million new trademarks. So think about trademarks as a proxy for new products that are being brought to market. Again, 7 million new trademarks, and 52% came from China. So a lot of this new innovation that we're seeing coming out of China, it's being driven by government policy, a lot of push for broader entrepreneurship in the Chinese sector, and also driven by technology. Companies like ZTE and Huawei have invested heavily in both B2C and B2B markets in order to drive their economy forward. So innovation is already high. Now start to think about what can we do to drive more productivity into the services-based world that we all live in to actually continue to increase innovation over time. And customers are already looking for this. We interviewed 400 of your customers, both business and IT leaders on a worldwide basis, and we asked them, what are their top business goals today? We asked them about 40 different types of business goals, and look what bubbled to the top. Innovate or deliver on new products or services. Invest in R&D, deliver digital products. Improve marketing and promotion. Make my workforce more efficient, and expand geographically. And so what do you think is missing from here? What didn't I read off? What do we typically see? Cutting costs, right? We always see that as number one. So what's really different about the market now and what's different for your customers as they think about their business is it's no longer enough just to think about driving revenue and cutting costs. It's really about how do you help them innovate in their business where the market is so competitive, and particularly in services-based industries where it's very difficult to drive higher levels of productivity. And again, there's so much competition both geographically and within US-based industry. So we know there's going to be a lot of innovation and investment on digital infrastructure going forward. We asked these customers what % of their business relies upon digital infrastructure, so things like computers and computer hardware, software, computer services, and physical infrastructure, things like planes and roads and buildings, heavy machinery, for example. They told us on average 40% of their business relies on digital today, but they expect a 9-point shift over the next 2 years. That is a huge shift when you think about the amount of capital investment that goes into infrastructure today. And of course, what we know is that not everybody is starting from the same place. When we look at those late adopters of technology in the market, they tell us that only 32% of their business relies on digital today, but they want to increase it to 52% in 2 years. They want to get to almost where the early adopters who have really driven this market are in 2 years' time. So what does this mean for you? What this means is there are really 2 distinct set of customers that you're going to need to address in the market. Those that have gotten started and are on a trajectory to try and drive their business to both efficiency and innovation. And then there's a set of customers that are way behind, and they're looking for a lot of help to get there. And typically for service providers like yourself, what we see is it takes 2 different sales teams and 2 different product execution teams in order to be able to move these different groups to where they need to be. So it's something you're going to have to think about as you think about the structure of your own business going forward. And of course, when we talk to these customers about what AI would mean for their workforce, what they told us was AI would actually address a lot of the business goals that they have. They want to improve productivity. They want to drive innovation with AI, impact decision-making, shift staff skill sets, maybe away from physical to more digital capabilities, reduce headcount, grow headcount, So this, again, is why we're looking at AI and we're so bullish about AI. Only about 4% of all organizations today are doing something with AI. But what we found in this study is that 75% of customers have near-term projects that they're launching either over the next 6 months or 2 years. There's a huge pipeline of AI activity in the enterprise today. And what was really interesting about what we found is that the IT organization is often where these companies are getting started. Things like security applications, fraud analytics, web analytics. A lot of these typically IT-intensive driven applications that come out of the IT department, as well as a lot of application in both sales and marketing teams, operations teams, and product teams. So that's important for a major reason. And what it means is that IT brands are still going to matter in this future world of AI. And so we ask customers, when they think about an IT transformation leader, which vendor comes to mind? Who's their primary cloud provider? And then who do they think of as an AI leader in the marketplace? And what's fascinating here is that Microsoft, Google, and IBM do really well in all three categories. They're seen as a leader or a capable provider in each of the areas. And what was really interesting that you're probably seeing right there in the purple is it didn't translate so well for Amazon. Amazon, who's been a huge disruptor in the cloud market and really driven the early adoption of cloud, it doesn't necessarily translate for them to be an IT transformation leader or to be a leader in AI. And the other thing that you might see there, if you start looking at the top of these bars, is that the consumer technology companies start to bubble to the top. Facebook, Tesla, Apple, these companies now have a seat at the table when they're talking about AI to the enterprise. So I think this is a really great example of what will happen when you address different customers who've had different experiences with technologies, and they're on a different journey when it comes to technology adoption. It creates an environment where new vendors come to the table, right? We've seen this time and time again in the marketplace. All right, so let's talk about where we are overall with IT spending. And we asked customers to rate how important 14 different technologies are. And here's what came to the top. Cybersecurity, it is a foundation, it's fundamental, it is a showstopper. Customers are spending a lot of money around security today. In combination with cloud, either infrastructure or applications, customer experience systems, changing the experience for their customers, and then data integration. And what we actually see is that the combination of data integration and cloud with cybersecurity and AI is where we see the customers that are on the path to moving most quickly to an IT transformation roadmap. So it's really the combination of security with data, with cloud, that's what's important here. No one of those applications or technologies is going to make a change on their own. It's how they all fit together, and it makes sense. The more data you put in the cloud, the more you leverage cloud technologies, the more security you're going to need. They all move together. Then the next set of applications that we see are going to be important in the market are what I think of as the intelligence applications. Data mining, governance tools, social media business workflows, IoT, artificial intelligence. So while customers today aren't necessarily spending as much on these applications and technologies, they're very, very much part of their short-term plans right now. And then a little bit further out is what I call the revolutionary apps. Things like 3D printing, robotics, AR, VR. I would put blockchain in here. These are the applications where we tend to see that they're pretty heavily industry-focused. And again, they're not quite on the top of the list for customers, but they're already starting to think about what they're going to invest there. So what's important for you is you have to think about what does your company's strategy look like? How would you address all of this, knowing that your customers are going to be asking you about this entire spectrum of applications, because they're already thinking about what's happening with these applications for their own environment. And so if we look at cloud and isolate on what we've seen in the cloud market today, there has been a substantial workload shift to cloud. I don't need to tell you about that. But what this data is telling us is that customers aren't yet where they want to be. They're getting there, but they haven't yet reached their ideal state. We've seen a huge adoption of public cloud with SaaS and IaaS. we've seen even more adoption of private cloud capabilities, either hosted private cloud, where customers are deploying private clouds with a hoster, or their own on-premises private cloud capabilities. What is continuing to go away is everything non-cloud. So about 65% of what customers are deploying, or 65% of their applications are in a cloud environment today, but 40% of those applications are now flowing through a service provider. So for customers, there's two major shifts. They've re-platformed their entire environment to take advantage of the agility of cloud, and 40% of their applications now run through companies like yours. So they're giving up a lot of control as they move forward. However, not every application is created the same, and this is why private cloud has done so well. As customers modernize their own environments, they have in many respects defaulted to private cloud in order to protect those applications where security is high, and frankly, where they want to be able to extract a lot more ROI and value out of their on-premises infrastructure. Customers have spent $30 trillion in IT over the last 10 years. You don't rip that up and replace it overnight. So cloud has driven this massive re-platforming, and we know private cloud continues to be important, but the default for customers going forward is multi-cloud. And so 28% of customers in this study told us that they only deploy a single cloud in their environment, which of course tells us that about 70% do one or more clouds as they go forward. A lot of them still have low interoperability between those different cloud environments, but we also start to see about a third of all customers have either high interoperability between the different clouds, and 7% tell us that they've achieved that panacea where a single application can run across different clouds and there's no interruption of service. It's a single business process. What's been really fascinating about private cloud, and everybody sort of used to talk about, customers want to be able to connect their on-prem private environments with the public cloud. What we've actually found is that as customers get started, they like to connect their on-prem environment with either a hoster or a managed service provider, and then have the hoster or MSP connect to the public cloud. This is a way for them to mitigate risk and lower risk as they try to achieve agility. So you play a huge role in customers both deploying private clouds in their organization and being able to move to a public cloud environment. And so for the opportunity for you is to think about how can you move beyond just getting customers to build their cloud environments with you? How can you actually get them to move up the stack and think about doing ongoing maintenance with you, and then of course sell value-added services on top of this multi-cloud environment that your customers are building? So about 70% of customers tell us that they use a provider as they build their multi-cloud environments and architectures, which tells us that only about 32% want to go it alone. So they already see you in many respects as a trusted advisor in this space, and it really speaks to the opportunity that we see in this hosted world that customers are moving through. And it's for them the integration and the automation of this entire environment, which has become a challenge for them. It becomes very, very complex, and I'll walk you through some of that a little bit later. It also means for you that you have to stop thinking about customers in terms of, okay, how many build projects can I get this month? How many new contracts can I get in this month? If you want to think about moving up the y-axis, you have to start thinking about the lifetime value of a customer and thinking about customers in probably different ways than you have before. And maybe some of these build projects are actually loss leaders for bringing a customer in, getting them on your platform, and selling more and more to them over time. So let's look at where customers spend money in cloud. And we ask customers to apportion their cloud budgets across these 5 areas. And what you can see here is that infrastructure is actually a fairly small part of what customers are spending on cloud today. 80% of what they're spending on cloud is everything that lives above the infrastructure. And what it tells us is it gets harder and harder for you as time goes on to make money if you're just selling infrastructure alone. So let's step through some of these areas. So of course, the top infrastructure areas that we saw customers get started with was dedicated servers and basic website hosting. And what we've seen more and more of lately is private cloud, hosted private cloud environments, even public cloud resale that's coming from you, and certainly bare metal services where customers are deploying containers, usually for DevOps capabilities. What we know is that when customers are going to move to their next project, around infrastructure services, 70% of them are going to bundle additional services with them, either managed services, professional services, or security services. So there's a huge bundling that's happening right now in the infrastructure space. Application services and hosted applications have been a huge driver over the last 3 years around cloud. Security, again, in terms of security applications, has been a major driver. I probably don't need to tell all of you about the impact of Office 365 around moving customers' email from their on-prem environments to their off-prem environments. But take a look at what else is happening here. Database, data warehouse, data analytics. There's a huge drive around data right now for applications with the service provider community. And then managed services, which, you know, these are sort of the basic services that we've seen in managed services for a long time, seeing a lot of focus around archiving, backup and recovery, and certainly disaster recovery and site recovery. Of course, 24/7 support. But where the excitement lives is here. So over the last 2 years, we have seen the security landscape change completely. Security used to be a pretty easy market as an analyst to track. It was pretty much McAfee and Symantec. And then over the last 2 years, it's become an environment of companies like F5 and Imperva for web application firewalls for protecting against known attacks. And then companies like Kaspersky and Trend Micro to put in place antivirus capabilities. And then Zscaler and FireEye for anti-APT, so being able to detect ongoing persistent threats in customers' environments. And then for data encryption, companies like Cipher Cloud. And then for SIEM, Alert Logic for log and event analysis, being able to predict security issues before they even take place. So the market is vast right now. It's very complicated. And customers are spending a lot of money here. They're spending a lot of money on security. And while it doesn't necessarily mean that all of your contracting depends on a security story, I can tell you that security is often the thing that will stop a contract, particularly as it gets to the end. You have to have a story here either for yourself or somebody that you partner with. And then professional services. This is no longer the domain of the SIs and the outsourcers. We've seen a huge uptick in professional services and customers looking to smaller providers here. So cloud migration services, being able to move data between different cloud environments and move applications. Cloud integration services, as more of a multi-cloud environment takes place, being able to integrate data. Cloud strategy services, building a 5-year plan with your customers. And then assessment services, helping your customers choose which platform is right for them and which location is right for them. I can tell you the money's being made in the middle, integration services and strategy services. And the reason why it's important is because these are very, very sticky services. It means as a provider, you get to know their environment very, very well when you're looking that deep into their data. And you're also setting a path for them. You're putting a 5-year roadmap in front of them. And this will make you a trusted advisor with your clients. So when you put it all together, and you look at the services that customers are buying around cloud, it is a long tail of services. And this is a full IT portfolio that they're buying from service providers today. And what it also means is this is what customers need today to develop a business-ready cloud. And with the long tail of services that we're seeing in the market, there is also a very long tail of providers here. So over on the left are the hyperscalers that we all know and love. And they got started in this market by selling not just to enterprise customers, but they actually got started selling to smaller providers, probably companies like yourselves, ISVs, MSPs, some of the smaller hosters, some of these providers that didn't want their own data centers and infrastructure. And then what happened pretty quickly was they started selling through what had been their own customers to get to the enterprise customer. And you all here know this model very well, right? This sell-through model, this resale model. And of course, the cloud brokers, distributors, and resellers are very, very much part of this market. But what we're seeing more of is this, and it's sell with. And we're seeing a lot of what these tier 2 and tier 3 providers partnering with each other in order to be able to develop that complete holistic solution that I was showing you on the previous slide. The hyperscalers don't do this very well. They're looking to partner and sell with the larger provider community, but what they don't do very well is what you can do, and is bring that full suite of services to your end customers and be the trusted advisor with your clients. So advisor. And so what we continue to see is there's going to be this shared risk-reward model between all of you. So I hope you've all been introducing yourselves today to each other and making great contacts, because we see, particularly in region, a lot of smaller providers working together in order to be able to develop a complete customer solution. So we see security companies working with data integration companies, working with a hoster, so that they can go address a single client and bring that full solution together. And so again, what's different here is everybody's got skin in the game. It's not just about resale. It's not just about developing more money from one of your partners. This is about going into the account together, and everybody is accountable. So what does this mean for your customers? Their world gets really, really complex. In this study, they told us that they expect a 50% growth in their application portfolio over the next 2 years, and that 38% of those applications were going to be built in a modular framework versus a monolithic framework that a lot of us have been used to. We also know that about 50% of all the applications are going to live at a remote or edge site, and that most customers expect there are going to be high interdependencies between those applications. In fact, we know that the typical business application today has anywhere from 4 to 8 other applications that it's dependent on in order to be able to work that through that entire workflow. So this is a very complex environment for your customers. It's difficult for them to manage. They are looking to you to help lower this complexity for them, and what they're really looking for is a single fabric that will sit across their entire environment that offers standardization across their architecture and visibility into their overall environment, whether it's on-premises or off-premises. So it's no wonder, because of the complexity, that customers today are having difficulty managing it themselves. We ask customers which applications are they investing the most in, and where are their largest skills gaps on premises. And you can see where they're spending the most money is where they have the most skills gaps. Again, security, cloud, data integration. But they're also seeing a lot of skills gaps in those next set of intelligent applications. So even though they're not spending as much money there today, they are already concerned that they don't have the internal IT skills gaps to manage that environment, and certainly what's coming. And even for those revolutionary apps, the expertise does not live within their environment today, and we expect that this will become a more intense problem as time goes on. So this is a huge opportunity for you to build these competencies within your own business and be, again, the trusted advisor, the extension to your customer's environment, be able to bring these skill sets to them and lower complexity. So we have some issues with jobs growth in the US around the IT marketplace. There's about a 500,000 job gap in the IT jobs area. So by 2026, we expect that there'll be just over 5 million jobs in IT, and we have about 4.5 million today. And one of the challenges we've had is we haven't had a lot of kids coming out of college graduating with computer science degrees. It's definitely growing. There was a 10% increase in the number of computer science graduates over the last 10 years. But take a look at healthcare. 168% growth in healthcare qualifications in healthcare. So there's a lot of competition for highly skilled workers, and they haven't been coming to computer science. And so again, with this large looming skills gap that we see in the marketplace, there's a couple of things that can be done. There could be reskilling. We can move employees from one industry to the next. But there's another large opportunity, and that is in addressing women and engaging women in IT. So let's look at the US worker population. 47% of all US workers today are women, and 57% of all US college graduates today are women. There's more women graduating from college today than there are men. And a lot of those women have gone into healthcare industries. 75% of all US healthcare workers today are women. And again, this is highly skilled labor. And let's take a look at IT. Only 25% of all US IT workers in IT are women. 18% of computer science graduates are women. Only 13% of all computer programming graduates are women. That's down from 37% in the mid-80s. And then 8% of all primary patent holders today are women. We have just completely left women behind in the IT market. And it's a huge opportunity to fill that skills gap. I would also say there's a lot more to this than just filling the skills gap, This is really a business problem for companies today. When you think about how much of the world is going to go digital and how reliant we're all going to be on IT, it's really going to take a more diverse workforce to think through what are some of the new products and services that can come to market and bring a different level of experience and skill sets to look for the white space opportunity in your client base. It's also a shareholder problem. There's been a lot of negative press in the market. We've seen some very large public companies lose billions of dollars overnight as part of some of these issues with their press. And it's also an economic problem. If we're not addressing half the workforce in the IT sector, and 86% of the world is going to go to services, we've really missed a huge opportunity here. So I'm going to leave you with 3 things as we wrap this up. First, technology still matters. Some technologies matter more than others. It's really the integration of cloud, data, AI, and security. It's the integration of all of these that's going to drive multiplied innovation for your customers. And then partnerships are going to be incredibly important going forward. My advice to you is partner well with those that partner well. It's a huge market. There are a lot of vendors in this space. I know it can feel like a lot of the providers in this market are competing with you, but it's a massive opportunity. Don't not partner because you're worried about competition. There's plenty of opportunity for everybody here. And then finally, going forward, humans matter. Humans matter more than ever. Because at the end of what this highly efficient AI world is going to look like, the only thing that's really going to matter is innovation. And diversity matters for multiplied human innovation. So with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate being here today. Thank you so much.